Something genuinely historic just happened, and it's the kind of moment you're going to want to remember exactly where you were when you first heard it. Patrick Mahomes has been the presumptive best quarterback in football for years now, an almost unquestioned title that nobody seriously challenged. That just changed. League executives, scouts, and coaches were polled, and for the first time, Josh Allen has officially overtaken Patrick Mahomes as the #1 ranked quarterback in the entire NFL. But that's just the beginning of this story, because buried inside this ranking is a genuinely fascinating debate about exactly how this vote played out. A legendary comparison to one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history that could define the entire second half of Josh Allen's career. And a brand new defensive philosophy under coordinator Jim Leonhard that could completely reshape how this team wins football games. ESPN senior NFL reporter Jeremy Fowler broke it all down, and we're going through every single detail. The vote that shocked the league. Let's start with the headline itself, because the way this vote actually played out is genuinely more fascinating than the final result. According to Jeremy Fowler, who personally polled league executives, scouts, and coaches for ESPN's annual position-by-position rankings, Josh Allen edged out Patrick Mahomes for the top overall quarterback spot in the entire league. But here's the twist that makes this whole story so interesting. Josh Allen didn't actually receive the most first-place votes. Mahomes still captured 41% of all first-place votes cast, compared to Josh Allen's 34%. In other words, more individual voters still consider Patrick Mahomes the single best quarterback in football than consider Josh Allen the best. But here's where the numbers flip in Allen's favor. Mahomes picked up a noticeably higher number of votes scattered across the back half of the top 5 rankings, 5s, 7s, even 9s. Josh Allen, meanwhile, was overwhelmingly concentrated between 1 and 3, with maybe a handful of fourth-place votes sprinkled in. That consistency across the board gave Josh Allen the better overall composite average, a 2 compared to Mahomes' 2 average. Essentially, fewer people think Josh Allen is the single best quarterback alive, but almost everyone agrees he belongs firmly in that top tier, while opinions on Mahomes were slightly more split. According to Fowler, that tells you something genuinely interesting about where the league's evaluators currently stand. Some voters simply cannot let go of Mahomes, still viewing him as the best quarterback alive even though his individual production has dipped somewhat relative to his own extraordinarily high standards. But there's clearly a growing, real recognition around the league that Josh Allen has fully arrived as a legitimate #1 option. Why Josh Allen actually won this vote, so what exactly pushed Josh Allen over the top in the eyes of these evaluators? According to Fowler, it really comes down to 2 major factors: game planning difficulty and pure fear factor. Executives were essentially asked, in different words, does this quarterback keep you up at night? Does he represent a singular force of nature capable of simply taking over a game entirely on his own? And according to Fowler, that description applies to Josh Allen more than almost any other quarterback in the league right now, especially now that he's cut down significantly on turnovers over these past 2 seasons. That turnaround matters enormously here, because this exact same polling exercise conducted a couple of years ago actually produced some genuinely harsh criticism of Josh Allen from certain league executives, feedback that reportedly did not sit well with some people around the Buffalo organization at the time. Now, Josh Allen has fully come full circle, and it's a genuine credit to him personally that he managed to correct those turnover issues at the highest level of competition. There's also a fascinating supporting cast argument buried in this ranking that deserves real attention. Some of these coaches and executives specifically pointed out that Josh Allen has consistently made the players around him significantly better, even when his actual supporting cast, particularly at wide receiver, wasn't considered elite talent. Compare that to quarterbacks like Matthew Stafford or Joe Burrow, both of whom have benefited from working with genuine #1 caliber receivers surrounding them. Essentially a cleaner overall situation. Josh Allen never really had that same luxury throughout most of his career, and he still managed to produce at an elite level anyway. That distinction genuinely matters when evaluators are trying to separate pure talent from situational advantage. The John Elway comparison that should excite every Bills fan now, here's where this conversation gets genuinely fascinating. Because Fowler drew a direct historical parallel between Josh Allen's career trajectory and one of the most respected quarterbacks in NFL history, John Elway. And once you actually break down the comparison, it's honestly a little eerie. Elway spent years carrying the Denver Broncos to 3 separate Super Bowl appearances, only to lose all 3. It wasn't until later in his career, once the roster around him finally got constructed a little differently, with a different head coach and a fresh organizational voice, that Elway finally broke through. Winning back-to-back Super Bowls to close out his career in dramatic fashion, a run that fundamentally changed his entire legacy in the sport. Sound familiar? Big, strong, cannon-armed quarterback. Genuine organizational stability surrounding him early in his career. A body of work that clearly deserved a championship, but hadn't quite broken through yet. That's essentially the exact situation Josh Allen finds himself in right now, entering his prime years with the same organization that drafted him, having already built a URSUM that undeniably deserves a championship, waiting for the roster and coaching pieces to finally click into full alignment. And the encouraging news is that Buffalo genuinely appears to have a lot of those pieces already in place. According to Fowler, the biggest remaining question mark centers on what more this receiving core can provide around Josh Allen. DJ Moore represents a genuine step forward as a true number 1 option. Khalil Shakir has already proven himself as a reliable weapon. And Fowler specifically flagged real fascination with what Keon Coleman could become this season, suggesting he appears genuinely more prepared to be deployed both inside and outside, potentially even working from the slot in certain packages. If a player like Coleman can emerge as a legitimate primary option nobody had fully penciled in before, it could bring an entirely new dimension of balance to an offense that already features elite tight end play and a dominant running game. The defensive gamble that could define this season, but quarterback rankings and Elway comparisons aside, there's an entirely separate storyline hanging over this Bills team heading into 2026, and it centers on brand new defensive coordinator Jim Leonhard. Bills fans have understandably approached this transition with a genuine fear of the unknown, since almost nobody outside the building has actually witnessed Leonhard operating as a play-calling coordinator at the NFL level yet. According to Fowler, Leonhard has built a strong reputation throughout his coaching career, specifically around his pass-game acumen. Having worked in numerous coaching environments alongside a wide range of influences, most notably a stint alongside Sean Payton. Based on everything Fowler has gathered, the expectation is for an aggressive defensive style, but one built around real discipline rather than simply blitzing on every single down. Sure tackling, avoiding self-inflicted mistakes, and calculated. Purposeful aggression rather than chaos appear to be the foundational principles Leonhard is bringing into this new scheme. And here's a genuinely important piece of context that should ease some fan anxiety heading into the season. While the Bills might not boast the biggest individual star power along the defensive line or at edge rusher compared to some other rosters around the league, they've built genuinely impressive depth at those spots, giving Leonhard plenty of different bodies and looks to throw at opposing offenses. And critically, Ed Oliver appears to be entering this season fully healthy, which represents a massive boost, given how productive he was during the limited stretches he actually played last season. The perfect play that still doesn't work here is a genuinely fascinating point Fowler raised about what actually separates truly elite quarterbacks from merely very good ones, and it directly ties into the challenge facing Jim Leonhard's new defense. According to Fowler, the true mark of an elite quarterback isn't simply beating a defense that made mistakes. It's beating a defense that called the absolute perfect play against them and still finding a way to make a big play anyway. That's exactly the caliber of quarterback Mahomes, Allen, and Lamar Jackson all represent, the rare players capable of manufacturing something out of nothing even when a defensive coordinator does everything right. Remember Josh Allen breaking off a 52-yard touchdown run against a genuinely elite playoff-caliber Pittsburgh defense? That's precisely the kind of individual brilliance defensive coordinators around this league now have to account for. Building a roster around a singular superstar that naturally raises a bigger league-wide question worth exploring: how exactly should a franchise construct its overall roster around a truly elite, singular talent at quarterback? According to Fowler, that answer tends to ebb and flow depending on a franchise's specific circumstances, but a clear pattern still tends to emerge across the league. The best starting point in Fowler's assessment is almost always the offensive and defensive lines. Look at Philadelphia, a franchise that won a Super Bowl with a genuinely good, but not quite Allen or Mahomes tier quarterback in Jalen Hurts, largely because their offensive and defensive lines were both absolutely dominant. Build both lines into legitimate strengths first, and everything else around your quarterback becomes significantly easier to fill in and optimize. And Buffalo, according to Fowler, has struck a genuinely smart balance in exactly that regard, pairing meaningful, targeted free agency additions like DJ Moore with young, immediately impactful draft investment along both lines. It's an old-school team-building philosophy, but one that continues proving itself effective across the modern league. The stark contrast nobody's talking about here's one final storyline worth genuinely appreciating, because it highlights just how differently two potential Super Bowl contenders can be constructed. The Bills, under previous defensive leadership, historically avoided rushing young defensive players onto the field before they were fully ready. But given that Buffalo has now drafted a full dozen defensive players across their last two draft classes, Jim Leonhard may find himself with little choice but to lean on some genuinely young, unproven talent in relatively important roles this season. That represents a stark contrast to how a team like the Los Angeles Rams, another franchise plenty of people view as a legitimate Super Bowl contender, has approached building out their own defense. It wasn't that long ago that the Bills boasted several defensive players who consistently landed on national top 10 position rankings, names like Tremaine Edmunds, Matt Milano, and Tre'Davious White. But players age, move on, get traded, or leave in free agency, and suddenly an organization finds itself replacing what were once genuinely premier-level players, a transition that simply takes real time to fully develop new stars at those same positions. Right now, outside of cornerback Christian Benford, a genuinely excellent player who simply doesn't generate much national buzz, because the conversation around top cornerbacks in this league tends to be fairly locked in already, the Bills currently lack a true marquee, headline-grabbing name on that side of the ball. The scheme change that might actually be a blessing, but here's a genuinely encouraging wrinkle to close on. There was real fan anxiety when the Bills announced they were fundamentally overhauling their defensive philosophy, shifting away from a traditional 4-lineman, 3-linebacker alignment toward a 3-lineman, 4-linebacker structure instead. The initial worry was straightforward. What happens to all the players who were specifically built and developed for the old scheme? But according to Fowler, the early signs actually suggest the opposite outcome might be unfolding. Several players who didn't necessarily profile as ideal fits within the old 4-man front look like they could actually thrive within this new 3-4 structure instead, guys capable of playing on the edge of the line of scrimmage in ways that better suit their individual skill sets. Fowler specifically pointed to the kind of defensive line depth this roster now possesses. 7 or 8 genuinely playable bodies deep, the exact kind of rotational depth that allows a defense to deploy specialists in shorter bursts, disrupting opposing offenses in 20 or 30 snap windows before rotating in the next wave of fresh talent. That kind of scheme flexibility, paired with a completely new coaching voice and philosophy, could genuinely give several of these defensive players a real opportunity for a career reset heading into this season. Wrapping it all up, so there you have it, Bills Mafia. Josh Allen has officially been voted the #1 quarterback in the entire NFL by league executives, scouts, and coaches, narrowly edging out Patrick Mahomes despite receiving fewer first-place votes overall. There's a genuinely exciting historical parallel to John Elway's career arc that should give every single Bills fan real hope about what the back half of Josh Allen's prime could look like. And there's a brand new, aggressive, but disciplined defensive philosophy under Jim Leonhard that, despite some genuine uncertainty, might actually be perfectly suited to unlock hidden potential across this current roster. So tell us what you think. Does Josh Allen deserve this #1 ranking over Patrick Mahomes? Do you buy the John Elway comparison? And could this finally be the season Buffalo breaks through? And are you feeling more confident or more nervous about this defensive transition under Jim Leonhard? Drop your thoughts down in the comments. We want to hear every single one of them. Thanks so much for tuning in, Bills Mafia. We'll catch you next time.